I'm Josh. I'm 38 years old. I'm a software engineer, but I run my own company now. Nothing flashy, but it pays well and gives me time to actually live my life. You'd think that'd be something to be proud of, especially for a guy who came from a family that used to joke about how I'd peak at Pizza Hut. But in my family, success just means you owe everyone else a piece of it. I hadn't spoken about this stuff publicly before. Honestly, I wasn't sure anyone would believe me. But something happened last weekend that finally pushed me over the edge, and the fallout is still unfolding. So yeah, buckle up, because I've got some things to get off my chest. Growing up, I was the middle child, older sister, younger brother. Classic setup. But instead of being the peacekeeper or the forgotten one, I somehow ended up being both. My sister, Monica, was the golden child from day one. Straight A's, piano recitals, prom queen, the works. My little brother Ethan was the wild card, always getting into trouble, always being bailed out, but somehow never blamed. And me? I got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and kept my head down. That was my role, the invisible fixer. It wasn't always awful, not when I was little. I have a few good memories: backyard barbecues, camping trips, watching cartoons on Saturday mornings with cereal so sweet it made your teeth hurt. But those got fewer and farther between the older we got. As soon as we hit high school, the favoritism became clearer than ever. Monica got a new car on her 17th birthday. Ethan got a used Mustang that Dad fixed up for him. I took the bus. I still remember asking once, just once, if I could borrow the car to get to a job interview, and my dad said, "You're not entitled to things just because you want them, Josh." Cool. I got a full ride to college. That didn't seem to impress anyone. Monica went to an Ivy, and the family practically threw a parade. Ethan dropped out of community college after one semester, and they acted like he was just figuring things out. I didn't go no contact or anything. I still came to holidays. I still called on birthdays. But every time I came home, I felt like I was stepping back into a role I didn't audition for. The responsible one, the ATM, the guy who doesn't complain. They never really asked what I was working on. They just asked if I was still doing that computer thing. When I started my company in 2017, no one in my family even acknowledged it. Not really. I remember Monica rolling her eyes when I tried to explain what I did. "So, like apps or something?" she asked, like I just told her I worked at the Genius Bar. Ethan joked that I was probably building spyware. My dad just shrugged and asked if I was still single. But when that company started doing well, and I mean really well, suddenly, the interest shifted. It started small. My mom would call and mention how she and Dad were struggling with the new roof payments. I offered to help. She said no, of course, then called back the next day saying, "Well, if you insist." Then it was a plumbing issue. Then some medical bills. It was always just until we catch up. By 2020, I was quietly covering half their mortgage. They didn't ask, not directly, but I could read between the lines. I set up an auto payment. I never told them. I didn't want the credit. I just wanted to help. That's who I've always been. I figured maybe one day they'd acknowledge it. Maybe even thank me. But that day never came. Instead, they got bolder. Monica asked me to invest in her startup, which was really just a failed MLM she rebranded. I said no gently. She didn't speak to me for 6 months. Ethan borrowed $5,000 to pay off a credit card and ghosted me until the next Christmas. Still, I kept showing up. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was hope. Maybe I just didn't want to admit that my own family saw me as a walking wallet. Then came last Sunday. It was a warm, clear day, perfect for one of those casual, low-stakes family brunches where everyone pretends to be nicer than they actually are. We met at my parents' place. The yard looked fine, the flowers were blooming, and their house, the house I'd been paying to keep, stood there looking like something out of a mortgage commercial. I showed up with my son, Leo. He's 12. Smart, a little shy, big into robotics and coding. He's the kind of kid who'll take apart your toaster just to figure out how it works, and then put it back together without missing a screw. I love that about him. We were barely 5 minutes in when it happened. Ethan, sitting across from me with his usual smug grin, took a bite of his eggs and said, "You know, Josh, you should have Leo start mowing Mom and Dad's lawn. He's getting to that age. Builds character." I blinked. "He's 12. Exactly," Ethan said, Like that was the punchline. Manhood starts early. Monica snorted into her mimosa. It wouldn't kill him to do something useful. Honestly, it'd be good for him. Might make him a bit less soft. I was already clenching my jaw, trying not to let Leo see it. But then my mom, who'd been quiet until then, leaned over and added, "And let's not forget everything we've done for you, Josh. Some of that should trickle down." I actually laughed. I didn't mean to, it just slipped out. That tight, stunned kind of laugh where you're not sure if you heard someone correctly. "You want my son to do your yard work as payment for everything you've done for me?" They all looked so smug, like they'd just proposed the most reasonable thing in the world. My dad was nodding too, barely looking up from his coffee. No one even glanced at Leo. I looked at my son. He was staring down at his plate, pushing a piece of pancake around like he wanted to disappear. And in that moment, something in me just snapped. Not in a loud way. Not in a screaming, flipping the table kind of way. No, it was quieter than that. Like a switch flicked off. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just smiled. And that night, when Leo was asleep and I had a moment to myself, I logged into the payment dashboard where I'd been covering their mortgage every month. The auto pay was still running. Reliable. Quiet. Invisible. Like me. I hovered over the cancel button for a long time. Thought about all the holidays. The birthdays. The way they never really saw me unless they needed something. Then I clicked. And I didn't say a word. The first email hit around 11:47 p.m. A notice from the bank. Auto payment failed. Mortgage account now overdue. By midnight, there were 5 more. And by 12:32 a.m., my phone started buzzing. Missed call, Mom. Missed call, Dad. Missed call, Ethan. Text from Monica. Are you awake? I didn't answer. I just sat there, staring at the screen, watching their panic unfold. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, clear, and I knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I felt guilty, far from it, but because, for the first time in years, I felt awake. Like something inside me had been grinding for decades and finally snapped loose. I sat on the balcony with a blanket over my shoulders, sipping tea while my phone kept buzzing, pinging, vibrating against the table like a trapped bug. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I already knew the kind of messages that were waiting for me. By the time I came downstairs the next morning, Leo was getting ready for school, bouncing around in his usual quiet, energetic way. He had no idea what had happened the night before, and I wasn't about to dump all of this on a 12-year-old just because his family had no filter. We sat at the table and ate cereal. I asked him about his robotics project. He told me he'd figured out how to make the robot climb stairs. I high-fived him. Then we drove to school like it was any other Monday. But the minute I pulled back into the driveway, the calm shattered. My mom was parked outside my house. Not near my house. Not driving by. She was in the driveway. In my spot. In her beige SUV with her emergency lights on. Like she was staging some sort of suburban protest. She was already out of the car by the time I stepped out of mine. Arms crossed, sunglasses on, lips pressed together like she'd just swallowed something bitter. "Morning," I said. I wasn't playing dumb, just civil. "You canceled the mortgage payments," she said. No hello. No question mark. Just a sentence fired like a dart. I nodded. Yes. Her nostrils flared. "Why?" "You know why. You've always helped us, Josh." "Exactly," I said. "I've always helped." Quietly. Without asking for anything. Without anyone even acknowledging it. "And yesterday, you looked my son in the eye and said he owed you." "That was a joke," she snapped. "No," I said, walking past her toward my front door. "It was a habit." She followed me inside without being invited. That used to bother me more. Now it just felt pathetic. Like a dog running through an open gate without realizing the world isn't built for it. Inside, she took her usual spot at the kitchen island, like nothing had changed. Like she owned the place. "You're being dramatic," she said, adjusting her cardigan. "Everyone was just teasing. That's how families are." "No, Mom. That's how our family is." That caught her off guard. She blinked, the way she always did when you pushed back. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled stack of printouts, payment notices, bank emails. One even had a highlighter mark on it. She slid them across the counter like she was submitting evidence in a trial. "We're going to lose the house." "You were going to lose the house," I corrected. I just stopped hiding it. She stared at me for a long time. "So this is about revenge." I exhaled. "No. This is about boundaries. There was a silence, a heavy one. Then she said something I'll never forget. We sacrificed everything for you. Your father worked extra shifts. I skipped vacations. We put up with your moods, your silence, your little computer dreams. And now that you've made it, you're just walking away? And for a second, just a second, that guilt started to rise in me again. That old, familiar fog. That whisper that said maybe you do owe them something. Maybe they were right. But then I remembered the look on Leo's face. And the switch inside me stayed off. You didn't sacrifice, I said quietly. You ignored. You ignored me when I succeeded, and you punished me when I didn't fall in line. And now you're upset because I finally realized I don't owe you my silence. She stood there for a moment, speechless. Then she grabbed her papers, stormed out, and slammed the door so hard it shook the frame. I didn't hear from her the rest of the day, but the silence didn't last. By Tuesday morning, Monica had jumped in. She called 3 times, left a voicemail on the 4th. So you're just going to let them go bankrupt? What kind of son does that? Honestly, Josh, you've changed. No, I hadn't changed. I'd just stopped performing. Ethan, of course, chimed in with a text that simply said, "Real classy, bro." I didn't respond. But that was just the beginning. Thursday, I got an email from my dad. He never emailed me. Always let my mom or Monica do the dirty work. But this one was different. It was short, cold, no subject line. Josh, we're disappointed in you. This isn't how family works. You're better than this. I stared at those words for a long time. Not because they hurt, but because I realized, for the first time, they were trying to guilt me for not letting them use me. And that made everything crystal clear. They didn't want me. They wanted what I could give them. And when I stopped giving, they turned on me like I was a stranger. That weekend, Leo and I went to a local fair. We ate funnel cake and played rigged carnival games and rode a rusty Ferris wheel that made him scream with joy. I didn't check my phone once. I didn't want to. For the first time in forever, I felt free. But freedom has a price. And I was about to find out just how far my family was willing to go to make me pay it. Monday morning, I opened my inbox and saw an email from Leo's school. Subject, family incident, immediate attention required. I clicked it, and my stomach dropped. Apparently, someone had called the school pretending to be Leo's emergency contact, said they were concerned about neglect, and wanted to know if Leo had been showing up with bruises. They used words like unstable home and sudden behavioral changes. They asked if the school had noticed anything unusual since the boy's father had started isolating him from his family. I couldn't breathe. They'd used his full name, his grade. They knew what time he was picked up. I sat there, frozen. The school had dismissed it, thank God. Said they had no concerns and that Leo was doing just fine. But they were legally required to inform me. I didn't have proof, but I knew. This had my mother's fingerprints all over it. That night, I called her. No small talk. You try to get child services involved? Her voice was calm. Too calm. I don't know what you're talking about. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. You crossed a line. There was a long pause. Then, in the flattest tone I'd ever heard from her, she said, "You brought this on yourself." I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just hung up. And for the first time in my life, I felt done. But the worst was still to come. 2 days later, a letter arrived at my house. Certified. From a lawyer. It was a formal request, not quite a lawsuit, not yet, but a threat. A list of expenses incurred over the years. A breakdown of parental support rendered and an estimated moral debt. It was laughable, honestly. Tens of thousands of dollars for things like childhood housing, transportation to school, emotional investment. They were trying to invoice me for being their kid. And the kicker? They wanted Leo to testify. They claimed I was isolating him from his roots. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just petty anymore. This was war. I didn't open the envelope for hours. It just sat there on the counter like it was radioactive, this absurdly formal threat wrapped in ivory paper with gold lettering. Gold. As if that made it more legitimate. More honorable. The return address wasn't even a proper law firm. It was some hybrid mediation and legal consulting office I'd never heard of, tucked in a strip mall 3 towns over. But that didn't make it any less disturbing. They really thought they could shake me down like this. No, not they. My family. I finally opened the letter after Leo had gone to bed. I poured a drink first, sat at the table, and stared at the list again. Childhood rent. Age 0 to 18, $72,000. Emotional labor, 1995 to 2008, $25,000. College guidance, $5,000. It was so absurd I actually laughed. But the part that made my blood go cold was the last line. We are seeking moral and financial restitution in recognition of 38 years of one-sided sacrifice. In the interest of avoiding a public dispute, we are offering you the opportunity to settle this privately. I remember whispering to myself, "You've got to be kidding me." But they weren't. The next morning, I found Monica waiting in my driveway. Again. This time, she was dressed like she was headed to a board meeting. Blouse, pencil skirt, heels that didn't belong on concrete. She had a stack of folders in her hands and an expression that said she thought she had the moral high ground. "You got our letter," she said before I could even speak. "You mean the invoice for my childhood?" "It's not an invoice," she replied, already pushing past me. "It's a mediation offer." I didn't invite her in, but she walked straight to my dining room like she still lived in my head, like we were kids again and I had to share everything just to avoid the fight. "I figured I'd give you a chance to respond in person," she said, sitting down and spreading out the folders like we were in some arbitration. "Because honestly, this whole thing, it's beneath you." "You're right," I said. "It is beneath me." She smiled like she'd won, like I'd just agreed to everything. Then she pulled out a manila envelope, a real one this time, and slid it across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "A breakdown," she said, "of what you can offer. Property, vehicles, monthly support. You don't have to pay it all at once. But the longer you delay, the harder it'll be on mom and dad. And frankly, on your son." I stared at her. "You think threatening Leo is going to help you? Don't be dramatic. No one's threatening him. But he's part of the picture now. The longer you isolate him, the more likely it is someone reports it again. We can't control what the school hears." There it was. The veiled threat. The same kind of passive-aggressive poison that had kept me compliant for years. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise my voice. Instead, I picked up the envelope, tore it in half, and dropped it in the trash can. "You need to leave," I said. Monica stood slowly, eyes narrowing. "You always were ungrateful." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I just finally stopped pretending I owed you my life." She stared at me for a long beat. Then she smirked and walked out. That night, I sat on the edge of Leo's bed after he fell asleep. I watched him breathe, peaceful and unaware. And I knew I had to do more than just cancel payments. I had to protect him, from all of it. And that meant rebuilding everything from the ground up. Not just our boundaries, but our future. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I met with an attorney, a real one, explained everything, the payments, the threats, the attempt to involve child services. He listened, took notes, and then leaned back and said, "This isn't a legal issue. It's emotional warfare." He was right, but we still documented everything. I pulled bank statements going back to 2020, printouts of the mortgage payments, text threads, emails, voicemail recordings, screenshots from school correspondence. We built a digital archive so big it crashed my desktop once. Then I made it my mission to quietly, methodically, cut every financial tie to my family. Utilities in their name? Gone. Old streaming accounts they were using? Canceled. Subscriptions I'd been covering for years without thinking? Terminated. I even stopped paying for their shared cloud storage. It felt petty at first, but then I realized I'd been taught that boundaries were petty. That saying no was an act of war. And it wasn't just about money. It was about space. About oxygen. I started therapy again. Not the kind where you check boxes and nod. Real therapy. Digging deep, full of silence and sobs kind of therapy. I talked about the guilt. The way my stomach would knot every time my phone buzzed. The voice in my head that kept saying, "But they're your family." My therapist said something that stuck with me. Just because someone raised you doesn't mean they raised you well. I started journaling. Every night. No structure. No goals. Just raw thoughts. Some nights it was a page. Others, 10. Some entries were just a sentence. "I'm tired, but I'm awake." That one showed up a lot. I started spending more time with Leo. Real time. We built robots together. Watched old sci-fi movies. He taught me how to play Minecraft, badly. I taught him how to change a tire. We built a Saturday tradition of breakfast at the local diner, just the two of us. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. And slowly, the fog started to lift. I stopped jumping when the phone rang. Stopped feeling like I needed to explain myself to people who never listened. I started sleeping through the night again. Then one morning, about a month after the letter, Leo came down the stairs holding a drawing he'd made. It was us, me and him, standing on a hill with a little house in the background and a sign on it that said, home. But in the top corner, he'd scribbled something else in big block letters. Just US. I hung it on the fridge. Not long after that, something unexpected happened. I got a message from my Aunt Caroline. She was my mom's younger sister, and we hadn't talked much since my grandfather's funeral. But she'd always been kind to me when I was a kid. Quiet, observant, never part of the drama. Her message said, "Hey, I heard what's been going on. Just wanted to say I see you. And I'm proud of you for stepping back. If you ever need a place to talk or vent, I'm here." I cried for 10 minutes after reading it. Not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded me that not all family is broken. That some people do see you. That not everyone expects blood to come with a receipt. And that little crack of light. It grew. At Leo's next robotics competition, I met another dad. Single parent. Engineer. We got to talking. He offered me a chance to guest lecture at his son's middle school STEM club. I said yes. And for the first time, I realized I had something to give. Not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. That talk led to another. And another. And eventually, I was invited to join the board of a local mentorship program for teens interested in tech. Me, the moody kid with the computer dreams. Now showing kids how to build drones out of cardboard and salvage parts. There's something healing about teaching. About seeing someone's eyes light up because you gave them a tool they didn't know they had. It reminded me why I started coding in the first place. Not for money. Not for ego. But because it was mine. Because it made me feel capable when nothing else did. I didn't talk about my family in those meetings. But I didn't need to. Every line of code, every wire we soldered, it was a step away from the past and towards something clean, honest, free. And just as things were settling, just as I started to believe that maybe, the worst was behind me, I got a call. Not from my mother. Not from Monica. Not from Ethan. From the bank. They'd received a new payment on the mortgage. From an anonymous donor. But something was wrong. There was a dispute flag on the account. A pending freeze. And a claim filed against me. Not legal, but financial. Apparently, someone had told them I'd been fraudulently paying on behalf of the homeowners. And now they were investigating. That's when I realized. They weren't done. They were just getting started. There's a very specific kind of silence that falls over you when you realize your family doesn't just resent you. They're actively trying to erase the version of you they can't control. I sat at my kitchen table, that same spot where my mother had stood just weeks ago, throwing around words like sacrifice and entitlement, like confetti, and I stared at the email from the bank. The subject line was polite, almost comically so. Request for documentation regarding third-party payments. The body wasn't much better. Cold, clinical, and unsettlingly vague. We have received a formal inquiry regarding the nature of payments made on behalf of homeowners, Gregory and Susan Meyer, from the account registered to Joshua Meyer. Please provide documentation of consent and authorization, or indicate whether you wish to contest this inquiry. Pending resolution, we are required to place a temporary freeze on automatic payments and may be obligated to refer the matter to a third-party mediator. It was absurd. I wasn't even paying it anymore. I had stopped weeks ago. But someone was trying to retroactively frame me for financial overreach. Imply I'd been paying without their consent. That I'd been controlling them. Manipulating them. It was a new kind of audacity. Weaponized victimhood. And I knew exactly who was behind it. But this time, I wasn't going to react. I was going to respond. Because over the last few weeks, something in me had shifted. I wasn't the same man who used to tiptoe around these people. I wasn't afraid anymore. And I wasn't alone. My attorney, Mark, was the first person I called. "I've seen this kind of thing before," he said after reading the email. "It's not about winning a legal battle. It's about destabilizing you. Undermining your paper trail. Can they do that?" I asked. "They can try," he said. "But the fact that you stopped the payments voluntarily weeks ago, that helps. A lot." I sent him everything. Payment records. Emails from the bank. Even a photo of the old Christmas card my parents sent me in 2020, the year I started helping them, where they casually thanked me for keeping the roof over our heads. That single line would become surprisingly important later. But legal armor wasn't enough. I needed leverage. Not to hurt them. Not yet. But to stop them from dragging me back into the fog. So I started digging. At first, it was just a way to feel productive. I searched public records, tax filings, property deeds. I was looking for something, some crack in the perfect suburban image they wrapped themselves in. And it didn't take long. Turns out, my parents weren't just bad with money. They were reckless. The house I'd been paying the mortgage on wasn't even in their name anymore. They'd transferred the deed to Ethan back in 2019. Quietly. Slipped it through during one of his turning over a new leaf phases. Probably figured he'd handle it better than they could. Spoiler, he didn't. He'd taken out a helic against it. A big one. Then defaulted. Twice. The bank hadn't foreclosed only because my automatic payments kept covering the minimums. They weren't even aware of the lien issue until after I stopped. The whole thing was a financial Jenga tower, and I'd been the bottom block. And now that I was gone, the whole thing was swaying. I found more. Monica's wellness coaching business wasn't just a flop, it was operating under a revoked license. Her client contracts were hand-scribbled nonsense, and she was facing 2 refund disputes on PayPal from customers who claimed she ghosted them after charging $2,500 for spiritual detoxes. I wasn't even surprised. But the final straw? A voicemail Ethan accidentally left on my work line. He hadn't realized he was still connected. I caught about 40 seconds of background noise, and then this. He thinks he's untouchable, just because he's got money. But if we get the school involved again, or the bank, just make it messy enough, he'll fold. He always does. Mom says if we push just a little harder. Click. I must have replayed that voicemail 10 times. Not because I needed to confirm it was him. I recognized his voice immediately, but because I couldn't believe how calmly he said it. Like this wasn't war. Like it was sport. That's when I knew it was time to stop defending. Time to strategize. I called Mark the next day and laid out everything. The deed transfer, the helic, the revoked business license, the voicemail. He whistled low into the phone. Looks like you've got leverage. I don't want to blow it all up, I said. I just want it over. No more threats. No more letters. No more whisper campaigns at Leo's school. I want them out of our lives. Then you need to make it clear that if they keep pushing, you won't hold back. That's when the plan started to take shape. Not a lawsuit. Not a cease and desist. Not yet. Something smarter. Subtler. I started by documenting everything. I compiled a dossier. Yeah, a literal folder on my desktop called Emergency, with copies of the voicemail, the deed transfer, screenshots from Monica's defunct website, timestamps on her fake coaching sessions, and the bank's lien notice on Ethan's property. Then I created 3 versions of a single email, one for each of them. Not threatening. Not angry. Just clear. I didn't send them yet. I wanted to time it right. Instead, I focused on Leo. I met with his school counselor. Sat across from a kind-faced woman with tired eyes and explained, as carefully as I could, the situation with our family. I gave her documentation, reassured her there was no legal custody drama, that Leo was happy, safe, supported. She listened, and then she told me something that shook me. Apparently, someone had tried to schedule a meeting with her under my name. An uncle, she said, called and claimed he had joint guardianship. She shut it down immediately, but logged the call anyway. She hadn't mentioned it before because she assumed it was a mix-up. It wasn't. It was a fishing expedition. Another quiet little warhead aimed at my son. That night, I sat on my back porch with a cup of coffee and watched the sky. It was quiet. Still. But my hands were shaking. Not with fear. With focus. Because now I had what I needed. Not just data, but clarity. The next day, I started reaching out. I called Aunt Caroline again. Not for sympathy, but for intel. She knew things. She had always been the quiet observer in our family, but I was starting to think she'd seen more than I realized. And I was right. She told me stories I'd never heard. About how my parents took out a second mortgage in the 90s to cover Monica's private school while insisting I learn discipline by biking to public school every day. About how Ethan was almost arrested for identity theft 5 years ago, but my dad quietly paid off the victim under the table. She even had receipts. Literal ones. She forwarded me an old email chain between her and my mom where my mother bragged about getting me to pay their bills without making it seem like a handout. The subject line was, "How to raise a compliant son." That was the final lock on the door I'd already closed in my heart. I thanked Caroline. Asked if she'd be willing to write a statement. Not for court, but for me. She agreed without hesitation. I sent my lawyer the updated folder. He whistled again. "You realize," he said, "you could bury them with this." I don't want to bury them, I said. I want to warn them. And so I did. On a Monday morning, I sent all 3 emails. Individually, professionally. Each one began the same way. You are receiving this message as a final courtesy before I pursue legal remedies for harassment, defamation, and malicious interference in my personal and professional life. The body of each email was tailored. Monica's included the PayPal disputes and a request to cease contact with Leo's school. Ethan's referenced the deed transfer, the helic, and the voicemail. My parents' email simply included every record of financial support I provided since 2020, with a spreadsheet summary and tax legal classification of gifts rendered under moral duress. Each email ended with the same closing line. If I receive one more letter, one more veiled threat, or hear one more whisper of interference in my life or my son's, I will release this information, privately or publicly, as needed. This is your only warning. I gave them 7 days to respond. They responded in 3. Monica emailed back first. Short, panicked, full of backpedaling. I had no idea Ethan said that. I was just trying to help. I think things got out of hand. Ethan sent a text. No punctuation, all caps. Classic. You don't scare me, LOL, but I get it, your little sob story worked. Fine. We're done. My parents didn't reply. But 2 days later, I got a handwritten letter in my mailbox. Not from my mom. From my dad. It was 2 pages long. No apology. No admission. Just a cold acknowledgement that they understand my position and will respect my wishes moving forward. It was the closest thing I'd ever get to closure. And it would have been enough. But then something else happened. Something that changed everything. One of Monica's old clients found me. And what she told me, let's just say, this wasn't over. Not even close. She found me through LinkedIn, of all places. The message popped into my inbox late one night. A short, cautious note from a woman named Heather Evans. I almost ignored it, figured it was a spam pitch for business coaching or crypto trading. But something about the name stuck with me. So I opened it. Hi Josh. I hope it's okay I reached out. I know this might sound strange, but I was a client of Monica Myers last year. I saw your name mentioned in her intake materials. She referred to you as a financial guardian, which I thought meant business partner or silent investor. I've recently had some bad experiences with her and was hoping to ask you a few questions. Heather, financial guardian. That was a new one. I messaged her back and offered to hop on a Zoom call. 20 minutes later, I sat in my office, camera on, watching a woman in her mid-30s with a kind face and tired eyes recount her story. And by the end of it, my jaw was clenched so tightly it hurt. Heather had signed up for Monica's Wellness Transformation Program, a 3-month coaching package that promised full emotional detox, financial realignment, and something called energetic debt cleansing. The price? $8,000. Paid in full. Monica had told her she came from a family of high-vibration entrepreneurs, said her brother was a millionaire who backed all her programs to ensure client success. That's where my name came in. Monica had shown her one of my old business profile pages and said, Josh ensures all my high-tier clients get the experience they deserve. He protects my brand's integrity. What that actually meant, Heather discovered, was that if anything went wrong, Monica blamed me, told clients I restricted her funds, or withdrew support, or cut off the back end. She used me as a scapegoat every time something failed. And things failed a lot. Heather wasn't the only one. She joined a Facebook support group of former clients, people who had spent thousands on spiritual detoxes, personalized coaching, and wealth energy accelerators, only to be ghosted, gaslit, or publicly shamed for blocking their own growth. I don't know if you're involved, Heather said, but your name is still in her pitch materials. I thought you deserved to know. I sat there stunned, disgusted, not even surprised at this point, just tired. And then I thanked her. Because what she didn't realize was that she'd just given me the final piece I needed. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reputation. And that's a currency Monica, Ethan, and my parents had never learned to protect. I reached out to Mark, my attorney, and explained everything. He listened carefully, asked for screenshots, then said something I'd been waiting weeks to hear. If you want to go nuclear, now's the time. So I did. But not with rage. Not with screaming. Not with lawsuits. Not yet. No. I started with something simpler. Information. I contacted the support group Heather mentioned. asked if I could speak at one of their virtual meetups. I introduced myself not as Monica's brother, but as one of her victims. I shared screenshots, receipts, emails, explained the role she'd falsely cast me in. I made it clear I had no part in her scam and that I was prepared to help anyone who wanted to file claims or complaints. Half a dozen people reached out afterward asking for legal templates. Mark helped me draft a generalized affidavit they could adapt. Then I reported Monica to the Better Business Bureau, then to the State Licensing Board, then to PayPal, then to Stripe, then to the IRS, anonymously, of course, but with very specific details about her undeclared income. It didn't stop there. I remembered Monica had once bragged that her Instagram brand value was helping her land influencer deals. So I compiled a dossier of her scams, real client quotes, audio clips from Heather, even side-by-side screenshots of her advertising claims versus actual delivery. Then I created a private page, a little portfolio of truth. I didn't make it public. I sent it directly to the 5 brands listed in her latest sponsored posts. 3 replied. 2 terminated their partnership. 1 thanked me personally. That alone would have been enough. But fate? Fate has a twisted sense of humor. Because just as Monica's online empire started to quietly crumble, Ethan got arrested. Turns out that helic he took out against the house, the one I'd been unknowingly covering for months, wasn't just misused. It was part of a larger string of fraudulent loan applications. He'd been applying for business grants using fake LLCs, some of which listed me as a silent partner. He used my name, my SSN. The moment I found out, I reported it. Didn't flinch. Didn't call him. Didn't warn him. I filed the report, flagged the banks, froze my credit, and sent the documents to Mark. By the time Ethan realized what was happening, federal investigators were already looking into his accounts. The cherry on top? The deed to my parents' house, the one Ethan technically owned, was now considered collateral in a fraud investigation. The bank froze it, then seized it. It was gone. I got the news in the middle of breakfast with Leo. Just a quiet email from my lawyer that ended with, "The house is now in foreclosure. No further action required on your end." I read it twice, then smiled. Not because I wanted them homeless, but because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one keeping the roof over their heads. They were finally living in the world they'd built, without me holding up the ceiling. And my parents? Well, they didn't call, didn't write, didn't even try to guilt me. They vanished into the silence like shadows running out of light. I'd won, but not by fighting, by walking away with receipts. Leo and I moved that summer. Nothing dramatic, just a new house in a better school district. Bigger yard, quieter neighborhood. I built a new office out back, separate from the house, where I consult part-time and tinker with old robotics kits. One day, Leo came in with a printed certificate he made himself, world's best dad and engineer. I hung it next to my degree. We still go to our Saturday breakfasts, still play Minecraft, still build silly robots with googly eyes. But now the air feels different. Clean. Free. And as for Monica, Ethan, and my parents, I haven't heard a word from them in nearly a year. But sometimes I imagine them scrolling through social media, seeing Leo and me at science fairs, on road trips, building life one project at a time. And I wonder if they finally understand. The only thing I ever wanted was peace. And when they couldn't give it to me, I built it myself. And this time, no one's getting in without an invitation.
The luxury of success. But some of these habits I adopted long before, actually. The hostile email autoresponder started a long time ago. I used to own the domain. I let it go.
Don't do coffee.com.
I don't do coffee.com. I used to reply from that email just so people would get the point. But I stopped being rude about it. Now I just ghost. I just disappear. My wife knows not to ever book or schedule me for anything. I'm not expected to go to couples dinners. I'm not expected to go to birthdays. I'm not expected to go to weddings. If somebody tries to rope her into having me show up, she says he makes his own decisions. You got to ask him directly.
What about
and vice versa?
Well, are you not killing serendipity in a way there?
No, I'm freeing up all my time, so my entire life is serendipity. I get to interact with whoever I want, whenever I want, wherever I want.
So you'll hear the invite, but make the decision? Because if there's fewer things incoming, you're assuming that you know what's best for you all the time.
I don't commit to anything in the future. So I'll say, okay, if that thing is interesting, I'll see if I can get in that day when I'm in the mood. But there's nothing worse than something coming up that your past self committed you to, that your present self doesn't want to do.
God damn it, past
and then
Naval.
and then it destroys your entire calendar. It destroys your day, because there's like, oh, this 1 hour slot, which is sitting like a turd on my calendar that I have to like schedule my whole day around. I can't do anything at 20 minutes before, the 20 minutes afterwards. Yeah. Even for phone calls, if someone wants to do a phone call, say, okay, just text me when you're free. I'll text you when I'm free, and we'll just do it on the fly. It's a much better way of living than this overly scheduled, cal.com or iCal, whatever.
Like, was that the overscheduled life is not worth living?
It's not. I think it's a terrible way to live life. That's not how we evolved. It's not how we grew up. It's not how we were as children, hopefully, unless you have a helicopter parent or a tiger mom. Your natural order is freedom. I had a friend who said to me once, I never want to have to be at a specific place at a specific time. And I was like, oh my God, that's freedom. When I heard that, that changed my life right there.
You still alarm clockless?
Yes, I'm alarm clockless. Today I did set my alarm clock just so I wouldn't miss
Very
this.
important. Yeah, if you
but just so you know, I set the alarm clock from 11 a.m. in case I was stricken with the flu and slept in. I wasn't going to set my alarm clock for 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. And sure enough, I got up many hours before that.
Yeah.
But it was sort of a backup emergency alarm. In fact, sometimes when I have something that I need to do, I don't want to look at a calendar, so I'll just set an alarm for it.
Just sink a little bit more into that, like kind of like that fuck you energy, that self-prioritizing energy, because I think people rationally love the idea of this. I'm going to do what only I want to do, even if they've got the level of freedom.
It's not fuck you energy in the sense that I think everyone should live their life that way to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, we have our requirements around work and obligations that are genuinely important to us, but don't fritter away your life on randomly scheduled things and on things that aren't important, don't matter, and events and weddings and tedious dinners with tedious people that you don't want to go to. To the extent you can bring freedom into your life, optimize for that, you'll actually be more productive. You won't just be happier, more free. You will be more productive, because then you can focus on what is in front of you, whatever the biggest problem of that day. When I wake up in the morning, the first 4 hours are when I have the most energy. And that's when I want to solve all the hard problems. And the next 4 hours are when I kind of want to, do some more outdoorsy activities, or I want to work out, or maybe I can, have some meetings, but I'll try to do those last second based on whatever the day's priorities demand. The last 4 hours, I kind of want to wind down. I want to hang out with the kids, and I want to play games or read a book or something like that. So having that flexibility and freedom is really important. So you can just put whatever is most needed